Welcome to Alzheimer's Sunrise, lighting the way for patients and caregivers on Legends 100.3, brought to you by Alzheimer's Community Care, providing help and hope for thousands of families for the past 20 years. Here's Mary Barnes, CEO of Alzheimer's Community Care.
Welcome to Alzheimer's Sunrise, shining a light on patients and caregivers on Legends Radio 100.3 FM. Today we've got Karen Gilbert, our sparkly co-host here.
Thank you.
And I want you to introduce our guest speaker today.
Mary, thank you. This is Irv Seldin with us today. Irv is owner and president of Vising Angels of the Palm Beaches. And we know Irv quite some time. He has been an amazing partner when we are taking care of our families, and we know we can't do everything. And often we rely on our community partners, and one of those major services is home care. So we can provide care in the specialized adult day center, but often families need additional help in the home. Irv, can you tell us a little bit more about Vising Angels and how you got started in this field?
Sure. I'd spent almost 20 years in assisted living in the Philadelphia area. And then when my parents required care in the home, I became very interested in the concept of home care. And I began to look around for the best way to do that, did a lot of due diligence, and discovered Vising Angels and felt that it had the program and the integrity that could really, really help people in their homes.
So Vising Angels is not just here in Florida.
It's not.
Tell us
It's
about
actually
that.
all over the world. In the United States, there are more than 450 offices, and there are also offices in Korea, United Kingdom, Brazil, Canada, and a few other countries as well.
And the Vising Angels model now, you are providing private duty care. So we'll distinguish for a moment, because there is another type of home care that would typically be covered by the Medicare program and some private insurance, and that's typically what we call an intermittent visit. That's where a nurse may come in to do a specific type of care, like wound care after surgery. A physical therapist might come, a nursing assistant might come to do a bath visit. That's different. These are services that are typically not covered by Medicare, but they may be covered by a long-term care insurance.
That's right. The sort of home care that we provide is not just episodic, it's relational. So our caregivers are typically in the home from anywhere from 2 hours to 24 hours. And because of that, the relationship with the client is of paramount importance.
And so Vising Angels focuses at the certified nursing assistant level.
That's right.
Which means they've really honed in on what the scope of practice is for a nursing assistant in the various states, because it can differ. Nursing assistants in Florida can do quite a bit.
They can. There are certainly limitations, and one of our challenges is to communicate what those limitations are to our caregivers. But nursing assistants can help with virtually all of the activities of daily living. They can help with medication reminders and even assistance with self-administration of medications. They can help they can follow up with a therapist by helping the client with specific exercises under the instructions of the therapist.
Right, and the physical therapist and the occupational therapist typically will leave a list of exercises and how often they should do them. That's excellent. They can also do light housekeeping.
They can. They do
Prepare meals.
housekeeping. They help make sure that the client gets proper nutritious meals regularly. They do food shopping. They do errands. They take people to the doctors. Really just about anything that helps the person remain independent as possible and comfortable in their own home.
Do you find that many of your family caregivers are working, and that's why they need the private duty assistance so they can continue working?
Well, quite a few of them are working, and then quite a few of them live in different cities. So we have quite a few clients in the Palm Beach area whose children live in Chicago or New York or Philadelphia. And because of the distance, it's very important that there be a local presence, some sort of version of in loco parentis, but the opposite.
You know, Irv, you've taken an extraordinary interest in Alzheimer's. And as a home health agency, that means a lot to us. As an organization like Alzheimer's Community Care is, for us to have home health agencies that are really willing to go that extra mile, to be able to understand the dynamics of the family and as it relates to Alzheimer's disease or other neurocognitive disorders. So I know you also have already taken, level 1, level 2 training yourself.
I have. I was fortunate enough to be under Karen's tutelage for 4 hours. And
8 hours.
8 hours. That's what
4 hours
4 hours
each.
and 2 seconds.
Right.
Although I'd been working with people with Alzheimer's and other types of dementia for decades, I learned a lot more.
Well, this is a good time to mention. Florida, of course, we have the Department of Elder Affairs, and this department is very concerned that caregivers for this vulnerable population understand the diseases. It's a little bit unusual, though, that different types of providers have a different requirement for the amount of training they get. So hospitals get none. Home health agencies have a certain requirement, hospice, adult day, specialized adult day, as Alzheimer's Community Care is, nursing home, and then assisted living. It turns out, and you have that background in assisted living, in Florida, the assisted living training requirement is the most comprehensive. And it has this 4-hour level 1 and 4-hour level 2. And we have chosen as an organization to provide that higher level of assisted living training to all of our staff, whether they are nurses or CNAs, nursing assistants, or our operational staff or our fiscal staff. Everyone gets the training. You saw that importance as well. And after taking training and with your background, you were actually able to apply to be certified as a trainer.
I was. I applied to the University of South Florida, which administers the program for the Department of Elder Affairs, and I became a certified trainer for Alzheimer's disease and related disorders.
Which is excellent. So you have also taken advantage of the highest level of training that is provided, again, the assisted living curriculum.
Yes.
And then how are you rolling that out now that you've got that training, you've become recognized as a trainer?
Yes. Well, I do rely on the Alzheimer's Association training program, which is a tried and true program, very, very comprehensive. And all of our caregivers have to go through that. And not only all of our caregivers, but all of our office staff and anybody who might possibly have contact with a client who has dementia. Then I supplement that with in-person illustrations, acting out hypotheticals, role-playing, so that it really brings it home. People really understand what the dynamics are.
What percentage of the families that the patients you're caring for, would you guess actually have a documented, what we call neurocognitive disorder, whether it be Alzheimer's or one of the related disorders like Lewy body or vascular dementia?
Well, for us, it's up in the 60 to 70% range, which is extraordinarily high.
It is high.
But it's reflective of what seems to be an epidemic in this generation that's now in their 80s.
It is. Age is the greatest risk factor. As we know, it's the one that we cannot modify. So our risks do increase. So one of the things that is a very heavy focus in level 1 and 2 training is behavioral interventions, understanding that when a patient has a neurocognitive disorder like Alzheimer's, they cannot make their needs known. It's very difficult for them to let us know if they're hungry, if they're thirsty, if they're in pain. Things as simple as needing the restroom. But we've also learned how important social history is to providing care for someone. So our staff, your staff, they could understand the dynamics of Alzheimer's and the related disorders. They could understand what that means. But in a moment, we're going to talk about how important the social history is. So thank you again for joining us with Alzheimer's Sunrise, shining a light on patients and caregivers on Legends Radio, 100.3 FM. We invite you to call us at Alzheimer's Community Care at 561-683-2700. You can also reach us by email. And that address is info@alzcare.org. That's ALZCARE.org. And if you do call or reach out to us by email, please tell us that you heard us on Legends Radio. So, supplementing what we know about the diseases, how they come about, what the issues are when someone begins to have memory loss or a failure of some executive function, like driving, paying their bills, making a meal, and so on. We have learned that it's incredibly important to understand how they live their life, because that will impact the type of care plan that you establish for that nursing assistant in the home. They're getting a framework of that patient's greatest needs and what we expect the CNA, the Certified Nursing Assistant, to do. And you have an incredible story that you shared when you attended our class, and I want you to tell that story, but I will preface it by telling you that everyone that attends class writes an evaluation. And time after time, we get comments reflecting that the stories that were told in class, the real life examples, really stick with them. And we urge, as you know, you sat through my class, don't copy everything you see on the slides. Get the concept, because concepts will really imprint an image and stick with you. Please tell us the story that you shared in class.
Sure. We had a gentleman who was in his 90s who was very dignified. He was a former commander of a destroyer during World War II. And he was very dignified, and he wore a sport jacket and a tie all the time. However, he did not seem to want to bathe, and this became a hygiene problem. And all of our staff tried to persuade him very gently to take a bath, and he really refused. And as it turned out, one of our housekeepers really understood him and knew his background. And he went to the laundry room and he got a crisp white towel and ironed it. And he hung it over his forearm and raised his arm and approached this gentleman and said, "Commander, your bath is drawn," after which he willingly took a bath. So he needed to have that respect, and he was used to being treated as a superior in some way.
Absolutely. So that was a resident of your assisted living,
That's
from
right.
your assisted living days. Translating that to home care, if he were now a gentleman you were caring for with one of the nursing assistants, that would be front and center in his care plan. Refer to him as commander.
That's right.
And give him that recognition of his status and tie in with his former life, which he now remembers quite well, because
That's right.
short-term memory is significantly impaired. And that's huge. And we have a similar story from one of our day centers where a particular gentleman was getting very, very agitated when other patients were picked up by their caregivers and left for the day. And we're trying to brainstorm, what is this trigger for suddenly getting agitated? And then looked into his background. He had been fairly new with us, and he had been a sergeant in military service. And we're thinking now perhaps he's getting upset because people are leaving him. And if he's in charge, they're not supposed to leave unless he says it's okay. So the change that we made was having people actually leave a different way out of the building so that he wouldn't believe that people were leaving him. He would actually think they were just going to the restroom, because in that other direction was the restroom. And referring to him now as Sergeant.
I want to piggyback that on that knowledge, though, on that knowledge base. If you hadn't had the training, if you hadn't been sensitized to what Alzheimer's affects our behaviors, and it does, and a lot of the neurocognitive disorders do. Without that education, I have seen over my career very outstanding people that were head of corporations, but because of the people around them didn't understand the disease at all. I can remember many years ago, I would hope that this wouldn't happen today, he was a very wealthy man. His wife had died with Alzheimer's, and now he had some form of a neurocognitive disorder. I don't know if it was ever Alzheimer's. But he died in such a condition, meaning he had long fingernails, he had long hair, they couldn't shave him because he didn't want it, not relating to the fact that it was a disease process. He looked like pictures of you would have seen of Howard Hughes, because they were obeying his wishes, not realizing that this is not the way he ever lived. The man was he was impeccable. Dresser, suits, the handkerchief, the whole 9 yards. And even though I was in a very different type of role within the community, I tried to help them understand that this is not what he really would have wanted. This is not, I can't feel in my heart that he felt good but about his condition. But he just didn't want anybody to touch him, and this is, and there's that fear of water that we do understand that happens with Alzheimer's. So you're knowing and having that training and having it becomes more of a dynamics with your staff and with what we do go through in our daycares, because we try to figure out and we try to validate. There was always this big thing about reminiscing all the time, and that doesn't work for our Alzheimer's patient. Matter of fact, it actually gets them irritated and agitated because you're kind of telling them and reminding them they don't remember. Oh. That isn't where we want to go with this. But the validation of where they are, it works. And it's sometimes kind of a big bridge when we're trying to help our families. Once they get it, it's like a ray of sunshine has come into the house and into their lives. We do that all the time with our daycares and do that all the time. And so, Karen does a wonderful job in her training. And the training was open to the public that we do on level 1, level 2, is the behaviors. We have probably training, they say 4 hours. That's 8 hours for the two.
For the two classes,
that's the minimum.
Yes.
But you can go 10 hours if you want to.
And
you know what
sometimes
I mean?
with a big class, and we have family caregivers in our class, other professionals like Irv, we bring our new staff, of course, attend, our students attend, and sometimes with their experience that they bring to the class, there's so much dialogue, nobody's looking at the clock. We can go way past. Because again, as you're saying, Mary, they learn so much from these anecdotes.
Right.
More than they would ever learn from a textbook. This is how it really works.
It's almost like we could come up with a book that just has anecdotes in it.
We almost
And
could.
I think we should. I think that's something we should probably do.
And we've actually had that thought.
Yep.
Because learning from, and this is what caregivers share in support groups.
Absolutely.
Those
all the time.
real stories. So when you're preparing a CNA to go into the home, now first, of course, you have a nurse that goes out to do that's state law.
That's right.
They have to do that initial assessment because they actually frame the care plan for the CNA and they supervise it. There's a series of visits that they must do in supervision. But part of that care plan is the vital signs. This is your patient's medical diagnosis. These are their usual vital signs. This is their neurocognitive diagnosis, Alzheimer's or whatever. But part of that also needs to be, this is who your patient was.
That's right. You really need to understand the patient. I don't like the term patient. We call them clients.
They're clients, okay.
But really need to understand them as a person.
Exactly.
And understanding them as a person means knowing something about their history, what they did, what was their vocation, what were their accomplishments in life, what were their hobbies, what are their likes and dislikes, who were the people who were very important to them. Because all of that information can be a tremendous resource to you when you have to deal with a crisis situation or you have a situation where the person is either overly anxious or uncooperative.
Or says to you, I want to find my mother.
That's right. So then you can ask them to tell you about
Mother, that's right.
Their mother. So the social history is extremely important, and it's also helpful in terms of finding things to engage the person currently. For example, we have somebody who was an accountant, and he was very serious about his job, and very concerned about finances and so forth. And what we did was we got some accounting paper with the columns and
Yes,
so forth.
yes.
And we asked him to help us with some of the accounting.
There you go. Because that's where their interest was. It was their life's work, and they got up every morning with that goal. And that's very important now, getting up in the morning and having that goal, having something to accomplish.
We had a wonderful support group leader. Her name was Elsa Benson. Elsa was probably one of the original people that really, the original caregiver that I had a chance to really emotionally and in many ways learn from. And so she was very common sense, had a lot of practical common sense thinking. And so a caregiver called her up one day, frantic, that her husband was determined to go to work, determined to get those car keys because he wanted to go to work. So Elsa says, well, what did he do for work? Well, he was a longshoreman down on the New York docks. She said, oh, he worked for a union. She says, oh, yeah, he was a big union man. She says, put him on the phone. So he comes to the phone, and she says, by the way, this is the union office. Today we have a holiday, so you don't have to worry about going to work today. Okay, and he hangs up. So the wife calls back and says, Elsa, what did you do? What did you say? He's happy, he's out in the garden, he's doing fine.
He's got a day off.
She says he has a day off. It's a holiday. And he was a union. She says, oh my God. She says, I got to use that again. She says, you're absolutely right. That's validation.
That is the
That's
essence of
not
validation.
lying to anybody.
Right.
You're just getting into that urgent emotional feeling that he was feeling at that time, and she gave him a solution.
And contrast that if she kept saying to him, but you retired 20 years ago. If she kept trying to bring him into the here and now,
Where do you think that whole dynamics would have ended up?
that would not have worked.
No.
It would have been a confrontation.
Absolutely,
And if there's
and would have
anything-
ratcheted up his anxiety and
Yep.
his agitation and maybe
And nobody's
even
a
to
winner for that.
combativeness.
No.
This is Alzheimer's Sunrise, shining a light on patients and caregivers on Legends Radio, 100.3 FM. You can call Alzheimer's Community Care at 561-683-2700 or send us an email, info@alzcare.org, ALZCARE.org. And if you do, please tell us you heard us on Legends Radio. We do want to spend a few minutes. We know the importance and the value of hiring someone into your home that has had the kind of support that you provide for your staff through a licensed home health agency. However, we also know that sometimes families may have been referred to someone that is willing to work privately, in other words, not through an agency, and provide 10 hours of care a day or even as a live-in. But we know that that can sometimes be a minefield. And you're very knowledgeable of what Palm Beach County has done. We'd love to see the whole state do it. But for right now, Palm Beach County, in cooperation with the Sheriff's Office, has actually come up with a specific ordinance, almost a year old now. And I would love for you to speak to that and what that ordinance accomplishes and why it would be important. Again, best case is going to a licensed home health agency where you know the rules are being followed and the staff is vetted with the required criminal background check. But talk to us about some of the pitfalls of hiring someone privately into your home and what that ordinance accomplishes.
Sure. Well, there's great temptation for many families to hire a private caregiver. Often it's much less expensive. They may have gotten a recommendation from a friend or another family member, and it's really a very, very risky thing to do. A person with dementia is much more vulnerable than a person without dementia. They're less likely to notice that they're being abused or exploited. They're less likely to report it. If they do report it, they're less likely to be believed. And because they're in their home and there aren't other eyes watching all the time, it's an especially vulnerable situation. So the detectives in the Financial Crimes Division of the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department, who deal with this all the time, noticed that there were so many cases of exploitation and abuse that they became very proactive, and they lobbied Palm Beach County to adopt an ordinance that requires all caregivers to be licensed by the county. And in order to be licensed, a caregiver has to be photographed. They have to have their fingerprints taken. Their fingerprints have to be run through the FBI database, level 2 screening that are required by agencies. The ordinance went into effect in February, I believe, of last year. It had been delayed several times because there was such a backlog of people who
Wanted to get registered.
wanted to
Wow,
be registered.
certified. Excellent.
So it does provide some level of protection, and you're lucky if you live in Palm Beach County for that reason. But it really isn't foolproof
It's not foolproof.
at all. And if you do have a private caregiver and they don't have an ID badge issued by the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department, you're dealing with somebody who's already violating the law.
That's right. And we have about 8,000 or so have already gone through
It
this.
costs about $70.
Right.
And they do the background check, like you said, Irv. It's good for 5 years. Now, something could happen after they got that badge and they got that, right away. I mean, but at least they made the attempt. And guess what? If they have an infraction, it will show up in the database
That's right. It is a
it's a
front-end
consumer-
protection
yeah.
for sure.
Really, really.
But your ultimate, again, having been a home health administrator, I know how closely home health agencies are surveyed for compliance with those background checks, for the constant education, making sure that their staff remain compliant with their licenses. There's a higher level of protection.
When it went in full enforcement after they got from the backlog, which was in September, they have over 8,000 people
That's
registered.
really a great
That's
development.
encouraging.
registered in that system. So, and it's identifying a workforce that we wouldn't have never seen before.
That's right.
And I'm hoping that those that are there are going to go on to being a home health agency worker or being an aide of some sort to go that next level.
Yes.
And that's what I'm hoping for, because these are people that normally want to do this, but they had no way of accessing it.
That's right.
So I think this is a very positive step. I'm so proud of our county commissioners, our sheriff's office. It was great.
Thank you so much, Irv. This was incredibly helpful. I think it answered a lot of questions for many. Again, if you'd like to reach us with additional questions, Alzheimer's Community Care, 561-683-2700, or email to info@alzcare.org, ALZCARE.org, and tell us you heard us on Legends Radio. And next week we will be back speaking with Dr. Mark Brody, a certified clinical trial investigator right here in Palm Beach County, working exclusively with those with Alzheimer's or related disorder. And he will be talking about the latest in research. And I know a lot of us are concerned about what's going on in the research arena. So thank you so much.
It's been a delight.
Thanks for listening to Alzheimer's Sunrise, lighting the way for patients and caregivers. To learn more about the help and hope available from Alzheimer's Community Care, call 561-683-2700 or visit alzcare.org. That's ALZcare.org. Tune in next Sunday at 6:30 for another edition of Alzheimer's Sunrise, lighting the way for patients and caregivers right here on Legends 100.3.